Up on Network Africa. The United Nations describes Tigray's humanitarian crisis as extremely grave. UK imposes sanctions on 4 Zimbabwean security officials over alleged human rights abuses. Plus, Mozambique records deadliest month of COVID-19 pandemic with 210 deaths. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shoboale. The head of the UN Refugee Agency has described the situation in Ethiopia's Tigray region as extremely grave and has urged the government to stop restricting access for humanitarian agencies. Filippo Grandi, who was speaking after visiting a camp where he said Eritrean refugees were complaining about incidents of rape. There's mounting evidence that all sides in the conflict have been committing human rights abuses against civilians. The head of the Norwegian Refugee Council also says the international community is failing in its duty to reach millions of desperate people. Freelance journalist Simon Marks joins us now live from Ethiopia to tell us more about this. Simon, the UN has yet again raised an alarm that the humanitarian crisis in Tigray is extremely grave. What more can you tell us about this?
Yeah, so the head of the UN's refugee agency, Filippo Grandi, visited a couple of refugee camps in the southern part of Tigray over the weekend. And there he spoke with Eritrean refugees who had fled to northern camps where, officials and witnesses say Eritrea has had a heavy involvement in fighting with Tigray militia and Tigray forces in that area. So you've got a situation of between 15 to 20,000 refugees, which are currently unaccounted for from these two camps, where the UN simply doesn't know where they are, in what conditions they're living, and whether they're simply dead or alive. They confirmed that, or he confirmed rather, in the call with reporters yesterday, that refugees had reported being shot at by Tigray militia in the north, as well as being abducted and persecuted by Eritrean forces. But more generally, there's a lack of food items, there's a lack of medicine, non-food items. The banking sector is still shut down. There's no telecommunication services in most of the region. No health centers are operating. I think 80% of health centers are just not operating and don't have any staff. So clearly, it's been months, but the international community want more access. They have some along the main roads. In the north, there is access from Mekele through to Shire, which is a town in the northwest. But there's no access off the main road, and that's where a lot of the needs are.
Yeah, Simon, amid all this, there are also reports of both government forces and TPLF fighters committing war crimes in Tigray. Are there plans to escalate this matter, possibly to the International Criminal Court?
So far, I'm not hearing any government pushing the ICC as a mechanism to investigate atrocities yet. But there are massive calls from the international community for independent investigations into atrocities among all the warring parties in this conflict. The Ethiopian government are saying publicly that they are open to an independent investigation. But let's see if they put their money where their mouth is on that and actually allowed a UN-backed investigation into atrocities, war crimes, gender-based violence, rape. All these things need investigating.
Yeah, taking a look at what the U.S. said last week, it said it has credible reports that Eritrean troops were committing right abuses in Tigray. How are both sides, the Ethiopian government and the Eritrean government, reacting to this?
Well, Ethiopia's position is essentially not to react to it. They deny any involvement or any knowledge of Eritrean troops and their presence in Ethiopia. They also say that if they're in Ethiopia, they weren't invited by Ethiopia. They came in on their own accord. But there's obviously a lot of skepticism around that. Experts watching the situation seem to say that without Eritrean presence, the Ethiopian forces might struggle to contain the conflict and actually and hold territory in the Tigray region. So the Eritrean standpoint is to deflect. The information minister has come out saying any such claims are just an attack against Eritrea and part of a sort of agenda to slander the Eritrean government.
All right, then, Simon, so much to keep our eyes on. Freelance journalist Simon Marks, thank you so much for joining us on Network Africa.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, has visited South Sudan to observe the opportunities and challenges of the country's fragile peace process. The UN envoy met with government officials, refugees, internally displaced people, host communities and returnees who are hoping to settle back into their homeland.
When NYEKUOLA first returned to South Sudan after fleeing conflict 4 years ago, she wept. The land she left behind had been occupied and her husband died while a refugee in Khartoum after long illness. She had to start from scratch, but still, it felt good to be back.
When we first came back, we cried. When I fled, I was with my husband, but I came back alone with my children. I had mixed feelings. It was painful, but at the same time, I was happy to be home.
NYEKUOLA is among some 350,000 South Sudanese refugees who have returned from countries of asylum since 2017, encouraged by news from friends and family that peace is slowly returning to their country. However, the coronavirus pandemic has further deepened the plight of people fleeing war. Asked whether she is concerned that conflict could return to her hometown, NYEKUOLA says she worries, but for now is willing to take a chance. She wants to start a business so she can take care of her family and needs capital.
If I'm given a tea shop with items like sugar, sweets and others, my niece and I can run the shop by selling tea and sweets.
Visiting the country to observe the opportunities and challenges of the fragile peace process, UN High Commissioner for Refugees Filippo Grandi met with government officials. Refugees, internally displaced people, host communities, and those who have recently returned, like in NYEKUOLA.
We have seen an increase in numbers of people returning. There's been a decline during the peak of the pandemic, but now it's picking up again ahead of the rainy season, which will occur in a few months. So this is an example of why it is important in this region to start thinking in terms of solutions.
At Panakwacha, border point between Sudan and South Sudan, Grandi met returning refugees traveling in buses packed high with beds, mattresses, and other belongings accumulated during their time in Khartoum, Sudan's capital. Years of conflict in South Sudan have severely damaged basic infrastructures and stretched humanitarian aid. A renewed agreement on the resolution of the conflict in the Republic of South Sudan, signed in September 2018 by warring parties, cautiously revived hopes of long-term stability, a necessity for lasting solutions to displacement, including return and local integration.
Elsewhere now, the British government has announced sanctions against 4 Zimbabwean security officials, accusing them of human rights abuses, including killing protesters. State Security Minister Owen Nkumbe, as well as the head of the police, the intelligence agency, and the former chief of the Presidential Guard will have all their assets in the UK frozen. They will also be banned from visiting. The UK referred to the killing of protesters during post-election violence in 2018 and unrest in January the following year. In the meantime, Zimbabwean opposition activists and a member of parliament have been arrested for using abusive and obscene language against police officers. Police say the trio were arrested after holding a demonstration outside a government building in the capital, Harare. It is unclear what the demonstration on Monday was about. Last year, the three, all members of the Movement for Democratic Change Party, were also arrested for lying about being tortured in custody. Zimbabwean journalist Nigel Yamatumbu joins us now to discuss more on the situation in the country. Nigel, what more can you tell us about the arrest of these three opposition activists? What's the update on their detention?
Well, the latest is that the magistrate has deferred a ruling. It's now just Joanna Mamombe and Cecilia Chimbiri. Joanna Mamombe being the MP in one of Harare's constituencies. So the magistrate has deferred the bail application to tomorrow. But as you say, the charges they are facing that of undermining the authority of police or obstructing police from effecting their mandate. The police were essentially responding to a flash demonstration which took place in Harare yesterday, a flash demonstration around, interestingly, the perpetual arrest of dissenting voices, the demand for release of political prisoners. And it is reported that they had a bit of a brush with the police officers who were implementing, who were going to effect rather arrest on these demonstrators, and leading to them being arrested, and we'll only hear whether they will be released on bail or continue to be placed on remand tomorrow morning.
Well, while we wait for that hearing, let's take a look at some other news now in the country. The British government has announced sanctions against 4 Zimbabwean security officials, accusing them of human rights abuses. Nigel, how is the Zimbabwean government reacting to this?
Well, I think their reaction is rather predictable because so far, number one, they maintain that these sanctions are unjustified. They maintain that these targeted sanctions will not necessarily have an impact on their re-engagement efforts, largely due to the fact that the 4 that have been placed on sanctions do neither have plans to travel to the United Kingdom, nor do they have assets in that country. So, but what is clear and evident is that the move by the UK government does indicate that the re-engagement process that President Mnangagwa has been trying to embark on since he took over power is not necessarily yielding any fruit, as it is becoming increasingly evident that it is more of the same. It is a new deception than a new dispensation.
All right, then, Nigel, a lot to keep our eyes on. Thank you so much for joining us on Network Africa.
Pleasure.
Back to the COVID-19 pandemic now. Mozambique recorded 210 deaths from COVID-19 in January, its worst month since the pandemic started. According to the Health Ministry, the number is more than half of the 367 deaths recorded from the disease. The Southern African country also confirmed 20,012 new cases in January, about a half of the total 38,654 cases confirmed so far. Patients in hospital with COVID-19 rose sharply, with daily admissions said to have increased fivefold. Last month, President FILIPPO announced the tightening of restrictions for 21 days to prevent the spread of the virus. Still to come on the program. We'll head over to Egypt to meet the country's Beetle Club. More details in a moment. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. And back in Zimbabwe, unable to travel overseas for healthcare due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the rich and powerful are discovering that the country's health system has been crumbling for years and is now in danger of being overwhelmed. According to the Ministry of Health data, the country of 15 million people has 84 working ventilators in public hospitals and 1,049 beds designated for COVID-19 patients in private and public institutions.
When Zimbabwe's rich and powerful get sick, they often go abroad for the best healthcare that money can buy. But with travel curtailed by the global health crisis, the elite are being exposed to a truth that has been long known by the masses. Zimbabwe's health system has been crumbling for years and is now struggling to cope. Among those from the upper echelons to die in recent days were 2 cabinet ministers and a retired general. At their funeral, Vice President Constantino Chiwenga, who has himself made several trips to China over the past 18 months for an unspecified illness, said COVID-19 had taught that we are all mortals.
Has taught us an important lesson, that we are all mortals. The fight against this pandemic does not allow for us to choose who to walk with, work with, or run with. It does not discriminate between the powerful and the weak, the privileged and the deprived, the haves and the have-nots.
A government spokesman sparked uproar after suggesting the deaths of ruling party officials may have been the work of, quote, medical assassins. He since apologized and deleted his tweet after health workers pointed out that they've been risking their lives for months to treat patients without adequate protective equipment, ventilators, and other vital supplies. Norman Matara, Secretary General of the Zimbabwe Association of Doctors for Human Rights, says they've been telling the government that the health system is not working.
These people, at every opportunity they get, they would go to South Africa, Indonesia, Singapore to get treatment. Now that they are facing the same system that we're talking about, they think that it's a result of medical practitioners, but it's actually a result of a broken system.
Anger among overwhelming medics is also adding to broader dissatisfaction amidst the prolonged economic crisis, just as infections are surging. More than half of Zimbabwe's over 32,000 confirmed cases were recorded in January alone, according to Reuters tally.
And away from the COVID-19 pandemic, 70 Libyan representatives from opposing factions have begun a 5-day meeting in Switzerland to select an interim prime minister and a 3-person presidency council. This comes as the warring factions make a crucial bid to unite their troubled country under a single government ahead of elections in December. Since the 2011 NATO-backed uprising that ousted longtime strongman Gaddafi, Libya has been in turmoil and split between between rival administrations in the East and West, each backed by an array of militias and foreign powers.
While the selection of the interim unified executive is not an election in the traditional sense, open competition is good for democracy. This is the kind of competition that can only take place when the guns are silent. Indeed, a year ago, this would not have been possible. The Libyan people are behind you. They support you, and they want you to succeed. They need you to succeed. Don't let them down. You will listen to the presentations of the candidates for the Presidency Council, who will address your questions, as well as the questions from the Libyan public that we collected through a dynamic digital dialogue session I held last night with over 1,000 of your fellow citizens, most of them young Libyans. This project is not about power sharing or dividing the cake. Rather, it is to form a temporary government composed of patriots who agree to shoulder and to share the responsibility to put Libyan sovereignty and the security, prosperity, and welfare of the Libyan people above narrow interests and far from the specter of foreign interference.
And on a lighter note, as we wrap up the program, enthusiasts in Egypt have taken to the streets of Cairo to enjoy rides in their VW Beetles. Lovers of the classic vehicle, who are known as Egypt's Beetle Club, gather every week to share their love for the automobile brand. Take a look.
Young and old, men and women, meet the Cairo Beetle lovers pouring through the city highways in multicolored and vintage Volkswagens. Dubbed Egypt's Beetle Club, the group of enthusiasts gather every week to share their love for the automobile.
The thing I love most about this car is that it has personality. Every one of these 30 cars has a different personality.
The club was founded 7 years ago in Cairo by 4 engineers aiming to help owners of these cars with mechanical issues. It quickly turned into a 22,000-member Facebook group, gathering people from Egypt and other Arab countries. Once or twice a week, up to 50 Beetle car owners in Egypt will hold an event, driving through the city's streets.
I've had this car for a short period of time, but I've since then stopped driving my automatic car and only drive this one. I go to work with it. I want to drive it. I want to wake up in the morning just so I can drive it.
The club has attracted male and female members of all ages, including non-Egyptian members like Saudi Arabian car enthusiast Magiouf El Tamimi.
Talking about the Beetle, it is fancier than any other car you can imagine. I'm here to work on it and make it even fancier.
Volkswagen rolled the last Beetle off the assembly line in July of 2019, the end of the road for a car that ran from Nazi Germany through hippie counterculture but failed to navigate a swerve in consumers' tastes.
Well, hey, whatever your passion is, enjoy it. And that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Shoboale.